The clock is ticking down to midnight tonight, but tomorrow is when the automatic across-the-board spending cuts could go into effect. And as we creep closer to the budget cut deadline, I want to bring in a key congressman who sits on both the Armed Services Committee and also the Budget Committee as well, and who met personally with the president this week to talk about sequestration. He is Republican Congressman Scott Rigell of Virginia, a friend of the show. He didn't come away from that meeting, by the way, with the president feeling too optimistic about sequestration. Also with us, of course, is Bloomberg political analyst Matt Dowd. Congressman Rigell, let me start with you. So you came away from this meeting with the president not optimistic, what? Optimistic about a deal, or optimistic that we're going to pass this, that we're not going to come together with a deal on this deadline, or what was it exactly?
Well, I walked into the meeting with the president concerned about his lack of leadership and being specific on how we address overall spending and specifically how we address sequestration. Unfortunately, I left the meeting with the same concern.
Okay, with the same concerns. You know, we talked with the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, which I mentioned that you're a member of, and he was very rooted in his own position, as well as Republican colleagues, that there should be no cuts made to the military budget. Are you in line with that?
Well, Betty, as we've discussed before, our country has a spending problem, and I have the privilege of serving this wonderful district, highest concentration of men and women in uniform in the country. That said, I know that we can find savings within the defense budget, but as it relates to sequestration, even if someone holds the view that defense spending ought to come down, this is not the way to do it. The president got $600 billion of tax increases in the deal that went through in December and the first day of January this year. I voted against that because it didn't reduce spending.
Right.
But we've got to arrest spending, but this is not the way to do it with sequestration.
Well, Matt, and you know, it's interesting because and I would say Congressman Rigell is on the more moderate side among his Republican colleagues, but both sides are basically digging in, and they haven't really even had any discussions so far ahead of this deadline. It sounds like we're going to get through it.
Well, I mean, that's the problem in Washington right now is not a sequestration problem. It's a leadership problem, as the congressman said in this situation, is the president points at the Republicans and blames the Republicans and offers no leadership. The Republicans point at the president. Many Republicans point at the president and say, you know, it's up to him. And in the end, everybody knows, the average American knows in all the districts, including military districts, cuts have to be made, and we have to figure out how do we deal with the overall tax code. Everybody knows that. For some reason, both sides of the aisle in Washington have a hard time coming up to the get to the table and say, how can we show leadership and solve this problem? It is a huge spending problem, yes. and there is something that could be done with the tax code. I'm not saying more revenues, but those two situations, pillars, Washington is unable to deal with at this moment.
Well, Congressman Rigell, I mean, what do you think of the job that your own leader has done, House Speaker John Boehner? What do you think of the job he's done on sequestration?
Well, I'm proud of the two bills that we passed in the 112th Congress. In fact, we had a briefing the other day in our district. I held up in my left hand the two bills that we had passed, and I said I'm proud of our conference for passing those. In my right hand, I hold the alternatives presented by our Democratic friends. There was nothing there. I really applaud our conference for being specific. And really the charge that I addressed with the president, respectfully but clearly and firmly, that I didn't think that he was leading with that same level of specificity, that's a valid charge. It really is. And the president is right to call attention to the adverse effects of sequestration. It's incumbent upon him then to put a definitive plan forward that would avert it.
Is that a valid point?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a very valid point, I think. But I think ultimately the problem we have is again, it's not a sequestration problem. We have to function, this country has to function in the global marketplace. And we have handcuffed ourselves with the fiscal problems that exist in this country right now and a leadership vacuum that exists in this country that we're not able to make the investments as a federal government with a $4 trillion budget in the things that we need to do to be innovative and function in a global marketplace. And that's the problem. We're strapped with entitlement programs. We're strapped with a bunch of other things that we have no ability to control anymore. And now we're left with this tiny part of the budget that we really should be using in a much broader way to deal with investments globally.
All right, Matt, thank you so much.
And Betty,
yes, go ahead.
The point that Matt's making is spot on. We have not addressed entitlements. And when the president just a couple of months ago said we need to begin to take a look at how we address entitlements, he'd been in office 4 years. He'd already won his second election. And I'm like, Mr. President, this is the time to lead. Let the American people know the difficult choices we must make to set the country on a better fiscal path. And the president is 1/3 of the government. I'm 1/435th of 1/2 of 1/3. And it's really up to the president to lead in this matter.
Point taken. Congressman, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Congressman Scott Rigell, and of course, to Bloomberg political analyst Matt